The desert night was silent, broken only by the faint thrum of distant engines and the rustle of sand carried by the wind. The outpost was cloaked in tension, every man's heartbeat seeming to echo louder than the insects in the dark. They had been surrounded for hours, their supply lines cut, radios jammed, and hope fading with each passing minute. Then came the chilling voice of the commander over the radio. "We need extraction. Any Black Hawk pilots here?" There was silence. Hardened soldiers, trained in everything from demolition to covert infiltration, glanced around at one another, eyes searching. But no hand rose. The only Black Hawk pilots they had were gone, lost in an ambush just hours earlier. The mission had turned into a nightmare, and their window for survival was narrowing by the second. That's when the least expected person stepped forward. She was quiet, almost invisible most days. A girl who never boasted, who never argued, who sat at the back of briefings scribbling in her notebook while others barked opinions. Many didn't even know her name. She was simply the tech girl, the one who maintained drones, adjusted communications, and kept to herself. But now, when the question of life and death hung in the air, her voice broke the silence, soft, hesitant, yet carrying a weight none had anticipated. "I can fly it." At first, no one believed her. Men who had seen decades of combat shook their heads, assuming fear had cracked her mind. But she repeated it stronger this time, her eyes steady despite the chaos around them. "I've trained on simulators since I was 16. I know the Black Hawk systems. I can get us out." What she didn't say, what no one there knew, was that her father, once a legendary pilot, had spent every night of her teenage years teaching her the craft in secrecy, long before she ever joined the unit as a technical assistant. The commander studied her, torn between disbelief and the bitter reality that no other options remained. The extraction window was closing, the enemy closing in like wolves. Finally, with a grim nod, he made the call. And just like that, the quiet girl who had lived in the shadows of giants was thrust into the light. They moved through the dark, every step weighed with the risk of discovery. By the time they reached the pad where the Black Hawk waited, riddled with bullet scars from the earlier ambush, her hands were trembling, not from fear of flying, but from the enormity of the lives now resting on her shoulders. 30 men, seasoned warriors, were looking to her as their only hope. When she climbed into the cockpit, the world seemed to narrow into silence. The switches, the dials, the controls, they weren't foreign to her. They were the language of her childhood, the lullabies her father once sang in mechanical rhythms. But simulators and memories were one thing. The weight of real steel, the growl of rotors spinning against the desert wind, that was another. The Black Hawk coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. The men outside ducked as the rotor wash kicked sand into their faces, and one by one, they loaded in, still disbelieving that the person at the controls was the same girl who had barely spoken a dozen words to them in months. The commander squeezed her shoulder once before climbing in himself. A silent gesture of trust. Then came the takeoff. The Black Hawk lifted shakily, the desert below tilting, swaying, threatening to pull them back down. Her grip was iron on the cyclic, her eyes fixed forward, sweat sliding down her temple. In her mind, she heard her father's voice, smooth on the lift. "Don't fight the machine. Feel it, trust it, guide it like water flowing uphill." She breathed, adjusted, and suddenly the bird was steady, climbing into the night sky like a shadow reborn. But flying was only the first challenge. The enemy wasn't blind. Tracers lit up the sky as insurgents opened fire, desperate to keep their prey from escaping. Bullets ripped through the darkness, each one a streak of death, some sparking against the Black Hawk's frame. Inside, soldiers clutched their rifles, their jaws clenched, but no one screamed. They all knew it was out of their hands now, only she stood between them and oblivion. Her heart hammered, but her mind was calm, sharper than it had ever been. She dipped the Black Hawk left, rolled it right, skimming low over jagged terrain. Every maneuver was a gamble, every turn a thread pulled from the edge of survival. Her breath synced with the rhythm of the rotors, her body and the machine becoming one. The men in the back felt it too. They had been led by decorated generals, rescued by trained pilots. But never had they felt a flight so desperate, so raw, so alive. The radio crackled, voices from command stunned to hear her flying. Some barked orders, others demanded identification, but she ignored them all. Her world was the sky, the terrain, the weight of 30 lives that depended on her refusing to fail. For an hour, they danced with death. Enemy fire pursued them, RPGs streaking dangerously close, the Black Hawk jolting from near misses. Twice she almost lost control, the craft lurching as alarms screamed in her headset. But each time she pulled it back, clinging to her father's lessons, to the fragments of memory that had prepared her for this impossible moment. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the lights of the friendly base appeared on the horizon. Exhaustion hit her in a wave, her arms heavy, her body trembling, but she held on. One last push, one last flight. As the Black Hawk descended onto the landing pad, battered but intact, the men erupted, not in shouts of victory, but in stunned silence. Because they understood. They hadn't just been saved. They had witnessed a miracle. When the rotors slowed and the desert quiet returned, the soldiers stepped out one by one, their boots touching solid ground they had never expected to see again. Some clapped her shoulder. Some saluted. Others simply looked at her with eyes that carried unspoken gratitude deeper than words could ever reach. She sat frozen in the cockpit for a moment, staring at her shaking hands, realizing what she had done. That night, she didn't feel like a hero. She didn't feel like a legend. She was still the quiet girl who preferred notebooks to medals, silence to speeches. But in the eyes of those she saved, she had become something more. A reminder that sometimes the strongest voices are the quietest, and sometimes the ones overlooked are the ones who rise when the world needs them most. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that courage can come from the most unexpected places, then please take a moment to like this video and share it with others. Your support helps keep these forgotten stories of bravery alive. Special request in the comments. Write what this story meant to you, or share about a time someone quiet and unseen surprised you with their strength. And remember this: heroes don't always wear medals or speak the loudest in the room. Sometimes they are simply the quiet ones, waiting for the moment when the world finally needs their voice.